Yesterday, Jeremy Clarkson shut the farmer's dog. No warning, no website notice, just a closed pub on what should have been a packed Saturday, with hundreds of people expecting tables, food, and a drink in one of the most talked about rural pubs in England. And the internet did what the internet always does. It assumed the worst, that the pub was failing, that the experiment was over, that the celebrity dream had finally collapsed under its own weight. Because from the outside, the farmer's dog looked like a very expensive mistake. A pub that supposedly loses money. A pub Clarkson himself has joked about. A pub people had already written off before they really understood what it was. But that is not what happened. Not even close. The closure was not a sign of failure. It was a sign of something far more interesting. Clarkson shut the pub for one day to throw his team a party. That is the real story. And once you understand that, you start to see that the farmer's dog was never just a pub at all. It was a machine. A carefully built, highly unusual, multi-layered business that turned a pub, a farm, a brand, and a television audience into one connected system. And by the end of this, the question will not be whether the pub works. It will be how many people misunderstood it from the very beginning. When the farmer's dog opened in August 2024, the reaction was immediate. People wanted to know whether it could survive. They wanted to know whether Clarkson was serious. They wanted to know if a rural pub, built around strict sourcing rules and a very public personality, could actually make commercial sense. The first quarter gave them a number to attack. A pre-tax loss of more than 8,000. That figure spread fast. For most people, that was the whole story. A flashy opening, a celebrity project, a small loss, end of discussion. But that was never the full picture. Because a pub is not always a pub. Sometimes it is a front door. Sometimes it is the entrance to something much bigger. And in this case, the pub was doing a job that the accounts alone could never explain. It was pulling people into a larger ecosystem. It was creating footfall. It was giving the site a reason to exist. It was turning a rural location into a destination. Clarkson did not build a pub to sell a few plates of food. He built a reason for people to arrive. That is the part most people missed. A farm shop sells products. A good pub sells atmosphere. But this place was doing both, and then using that traffic to feed the rest of the site. The first big clue was the numbers around demand. Thousands of visitors, packed weekends, people queuing for hours, people driving in from far away just to sit there, eat there, and say they had been there. That kind of demand does not happen by accident. It happens because the place is not selling food alone. It is selling participation. It is selling a story people want to enter. And Clarkson understands that better than most operators ever will. He has never built a business like a normal hospitality owner. He has built it like a broadcaster. He knows the value of attention. He knows the value of a scene. He knows the difference between a meal and a moment. That is why the closure caused such a reaction. Because people thought a closed pub meant a broken pub. In reality, it meant the business had enough strength to stop for a day and still feel in control. That is not weakness. That is leverage. The interesting part is what sits around the pub. The Farm Dog is not a single-purpose venue. It is part of a wider site. And that wider site is where the real business logic lives. The pub brings the crowd. The crowd creates the opportunity. The opportunity gets captured in multiple places. Food, drink, merchandise, brand demand, repeat attention. This is what makes the whole operation so difficult to copy. A normal pub can sell pub food. A normal pub can sell beer. A normal pub can sell atmosphere. But it cannot easily turn all three into a wider content and brand ecosystem. Clarkson can. And that is why people who looked only at the loss missed the point entirely. The loss was not the failure. The loss was part of the story. Because attention itself has value. Footfall has value. Conversation has value. The pub keeps the audience warm. The audience keeps the brand alive. And the brand keeps the rest of the machine moving. That is the model. It is not simple hospitality. It is media-backed destination commerce. And that changes everything. Here is the part that almost nobody in the mainstream coverage really joined up. The pub was never meant to behave like a normal pub. It was meant to behave like a magnet. Once people arrive, the site has multiple ways to capture value. That means the public sees one building. The business sees a whole network. And that is why the first loss never told the full story. It was only one line in a much bigger balance sheet. Clarkson's own public comments made the confusion even worse. He has joked that the pub turns 100 into 94. That line was funny because it sounded like a confession. It sounded like failure. It sounded like proof that the whole thing was a vanity project. But jokes like that work because they sound smaller than the real business. They make people underestimate what is sitting underneath. And that is exactly what happened here. The pub became famous for being supposedly impossible. People repeated the loss. People repeated the joke. People repeated the idea that it was all a bit silly. Meanwhile, the site kept drawing people in, and every visitor who came for the joke was also feeding the system. That is the irony. The mockery became marketing. The criticism became reach. The disbelief became traffic. And the traffic became the business. Clarkson has always understood one thing better than most people in his world. If enough people are talking about a thing, that thing becomes valuable even before the numbers catch up. That is why this story is not about one pub. It is about how modern attention works when it is attached to a real place. And it is about why old ideas about hospitality no longer explain what some creators are building. A traditional pub makes money by selling drinks and meals. A modern celebrity venue can make money by being a destination, a brand, and a live piece of entertainment all at once. That is a different game, and Clarkson is playing that game aggressively. But here is where it gets even more interesting. The pub closure was not random. It was not operational chaos. It was not the sort of embarrassment the internet wanted it to be. It was a deliberate pause to celebrate the people making the whole thing work. That matters, because the staff are not an afterthought in this model. They are part of the product. Without them, the experience falls apart. Without them, the crowd disappears. Without them, the whole illusion becomes obvious. So when Clarkson shut the place for a team party, he was not admitting weakness. He was showing confidence.